You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a more modern approach to selling, the application of virtual and hybrid selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. And welcome to this episode of the Sales Today podcast, part of the special Selling in the Gulf series. I am delighted to be joined by Daoud Abu Qasheh, who is the Senior VP of Sales at Bluvo. He has got an immense amount of sales background, particularly in this region. So, Daoud, welcome to the show.
Hi, Fred. Thank you very much for hosting me here. I really appreciate it.
We just had a little chat off there, and I know you're going to share some really cool stuff. So could you very briefly give us your background, where a lot of this experience is coming from? Then we'll get into the good stuff about what we need to do to be successful in this region.
Sure. So I'd like to describe myself as a sales enthusiast. I'm very passionate about sales. I actually started my sales career when I was 17 years old. I was reading a lot of sales books, and then I got into sales. I worked for a timeshare company for a couple of years, and then I joined a startup in Jordan. And then when I was just about to be 23, I was promoted to be a country manager for that company in Saudi Arabia. After this, I joined LinkedIn in 2012, and I really enjoyed my time at LinkedIn. I achieved great results. I was actually selected to join a team, a global team at LinkedIn called Team Inspire. I was mandated and I was sent to train people in offices like Chicago, New York, Amsterdam office. So for me, sales is a passion, a lifestyle, not a job. So this is how I would actually describe myself.
I love it. I've picked the right person to come on the show. And if you're training LinkedIn people around the world, again, maybe that's a separate episode.
Yeah, I would love to.
So the premise of the show is that we want to talk about how to be successful selling in the region, in the Gulf, in GCC countries. And I think rather than talk about the challenges, you'd said, well, you'd have to think about this and you want to talk about two different aspects. Is that correct? The individual and the corporate, and kind of ways that they can be successful. Yeah, let's change up the questioning structure. Which of those do you want to start with, individual or corporate?
So mainly your first question here, Fred, was what are the biggest challenges facing industry in the region? So I'm going to start from the market perspective.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to talk about the sales profession. Your second question was what is unique about selling in the region? Yeah. Which is a different actually kind of a question and has different structured answer from my side. So I'm going to tackle both parts. I think we will spend 2-3 minutes on each part. That's it. Okay. So what are the biggest challenges facing the industry? And then what is unique about selling? And then you have how do best companies and salespeople adapt? So this is the 3 areas I'm going to tackle from both sides, corporate and individuals. Make sense?
Perfect. I am all ears. Please take it away.
Okay, great. So in terms of the biggest challenges facing the industry here in the region, if we talk about the GCC market, we started to see the market as a saturated market. This is one of the biggest challenges now startups and even actually established businesses are facing. The competition landscape is becoming really rough. And this is where actually it requires companies and salespeople and sales leaders to put extra efforts to equip the teams and, their presentations and their pitching with more knowledge and more value. The second challenge that we have faced in the last 2-3 years was the remote working, which impacted the way we communicate with our clients and with our customers and the way we build relationships, especially in a region where relationships maybe is 10 times more than any other region in the world. And actually this remote working and the new digital era and, remote meetings, remote pitching, it actually even impacted the customer behavior and the buying cycle and even the decision-making thought process. So these are the challenges now we are facing. Now, if we're talking about sales as a profession here in the GCC, one of the challenges I always talk about to my colleagues is the appetite of people to work in sales or to consider a sales career. This is really tough, Fred, here in the region. Today, if you want to hire someone from the region in sales, it's tough. And I always say, if you go to any university and you survey grads of that university and you ask them, would you like to join a career in sales? I would actually say less of 5% of them would say yes.
Yeah.
So this is actually, especially for sales leaders and hiring managers, this is really tough. The second thing is the lack of a proper sales education and the sales training, especially the lack of Arabic content in sales. So today, as a sales professional or a sales leader, if I want to go and penetrate the Saudi market or UAE market, I always would love to prioritize to hire locals because, they know the region, they know the client, they know the behavior, they know the culture. But the lack of sales content and sales education in Arabic is one of the challenges that face sales professionals in the region. So I would say these are the main challenges from market perspective and individual perspective.
Cool. So just picking up on that last one, when you're talking about sales education training, because obviously that's really interesting to me personally, you're saying that it's not necessarily the content that is different, it's just that it's not in Arabic and that it's always being pushed in, well, I guess English most of the time. Is that correct?
Well,
Have I understood that correctly?
Actually, yes, partially yes, Fred. But also a localized content.
Yeah.
So it's not about translating content to Arabic, but localized content. Because today, as you might know, selling in the GCC is unique.
Yeah.
We need to localize the sales training content to more fit the GCC culture, market, customer behavior. So it's not about the language; it's actually localizing the content itself.
Okay, so obvious next question. Oh, you're making my life easy. How do we localize content? What do we need to do? Sort of take what would be almost like a global curriculum and make it really impactful in the area?
Well, Fred, this might actually lead us to our next point. Before we localize the content, we need to understand what is unique about selling in the region.
Yeah.
Without finding out what is unique about the region and, pinpoints these points, we cannot tackle this point in particular. So to localize the content, we need to understand the region in a much better way. And here, Fred, if you allow me, by the way, I can jump into this section now if you wish.
Yeah. No, hey, you're the guest. You run the podcast as far as I'm concerned. I just keep it on track.
All right. So to understand what selling in the region, I actually could list them in 4 or 5 points.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, we're talking about a multicultural region. We're talking about more than 200 nationalities living in this region. So coming to the GCC with one approach won't work.
Mm-hmm.
If you are selling in the UAE, you might actually dealing with Arabs. You might be dealing with UAE nationals. The next day, you might actually go and meet a British executive. The second day, you might actually meet someone from India or Asia. So one sales approach doesn't work in this region.
Mm-hmm.
And even although we are, the GCC are like from a cultural perspective, they're very close to each other, but selling in Saudi is different than selling in Bahrain or UAE. The expectations, the customer behavior, the process, the sophistication of the clients are different from one country to another country. And I always say, you might actually be very successful selling in the UAE, but you might not make it in Saudi if you don't actually adapt to the Saudi market. Even when it comes to hiring salespeople, the persona I would hire, the persona of salespeople I would hire in the UAE will be different than the persona I would hire in Saudi. So we need to take all these points into consideration when it comes even to localizing our training content or our sales enablement or even our go-to-market approach. The third point is in the GCC, the business and most of economic and technological initiatives here are pretty much driven by government and semi-government organizations. This is unique in this region, and this actually requires a unique approach, which I actually will tackle later on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is here in the GCC, we need to understand something. And actually, I'm from the Middle East, so I'm very close to the GCC market. But in the GCC in particular, the importance of relationship in making business is like, as I mentioned before, 10 times more than any other region in the world. So people here need to actually work on strengthen their relationship. And to do this, there are a lot of activities and actually training and content around this on how you can better understand the GCC culture, the client persona, their expectations, their motives. So this is very unique here in the region. The last point, and this is very important thing, is the culture in Middle East or GCC in specific doesn't separate business from personal life. So who you are as a person and who you are on Facebook might actually impact who you are as a professional and on LinkedIn. So this is something I always mention and tell to my friends who come from Europe or USA to work in the region. I always tell them, listen, guys, you are now one unit. Your personal life, your business life are interconnected in a way or another in this region. So I would say we need to understand these major points to first succeed in selling in the GCC and also to create a local training content.
Yeah. No, it's funny. I mean, all of those points are so relevant, so interesting. But I'm just reflecting on the last one. I know that me personally, I mean, I've worked in the region quite a lot. But when I first started, I had a almost like separate personality, not personalities, but separate styles, my business style, my personal style they never mix. I struggled a little bit, but as I just chilled naturally anyway, and I thought, you know what, I am me, and this is my style. And if you don't like it, well, whatever. Actually, it became far more attractive for that part of the world, and life became a lot easier. Actually, became easier in the other parts of the world as well. But yeah, it's a really interesting one, that, because some people wear this mask, don't they? And it just doesn't work there. Really cool, really interesting.
Yeah. I actually, in some cases, I actually found my clients Googled me, and they did not only look at my LinkedIn, they were checking my Facebook, Instagram, and this is actually, somehow I feel it's cool, like it's nice, So, but at the same time, it put a responsibility on you, you have to be careful about your personal brand.
I only live for work now, Daoud. I'm okay. No, but it's true. It's true. It's interesting. Cool. Okay, so brilliant. This is how it is unique, and it's a really special. It's really interesting. It's really fun. I mean, I love working over there. Thinking then about some of this localization, and it's great because actually as part of this series, I talked to a guy who's got a translation company. Except he never talked about that. He talked about localization, and it's like it's not just changing the words. That's an important part. People need to be in their mother tongue, but just changing those words isn't necessarily going to have the impact that you think you're going to get. So talk to me a little bit more about this localization then. How do we adapt? How do we localize? We've recognized that, it is different, it's unique. There are these challenges we've got to deal with. So what are some of the things that we can do to be successful?
All right. So mainly if we talk about salespeople and as a sales professional, what I always recommend here is to follow kind of, let's say, best practices to work in the GCC. Or to succeed as a sales in the GCC.
Yeah.
First of all, is you should learn and master the GCC culture and the traditions. Yeah. You don't have to practice them, but you should know them, and you know them by heart. And because you're gonna meet actually a Saudi national, a UAE national, a Bahraini national, and you will have to sell them at some point. You have to understand the social norm in the region. And I'm telling you this from a personal experience. I actually have seen people coming from Europe who actually didn't make it because they did not invest in learning and mastering the GCC culture. So mastering the culture will actually make you more comfortable dealing with the clients, and it will probably help you big time in breaking the ice with customers in the future. The other actually importance, or why this is important, is this will give you more clarity on the client personal and business motives and their buying signals, which will actually then support you in negotiating with them and the closing deal. So without, learning about the culture, learning about the tradition, you won't actually get the buying signals from your clients, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking very tactical maybe here, but
No,
this is actually true.
no, it is totally true. Again, I know from personal experience. Again, I was given some very bad advice first trips. People love working with Westerners, so I went more Western than I am. And bear in mind, I'm part Spanish, so actually I'm pretty chill. Very, very Western. It's like it's disaster. But when you start showing interest, and I started really to understand because I'm really curious, and just this is amazing. This is really interesting. Again, it made life so much easier, so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. The other point here, Fred, is always approach any sales call in the GCC with a genuine intention to build friendship and a strong relationship with your client or prospect. I actually always tell my team, whether they're from the GCC, from the Middle East, or from outside the region, do not start talking about business. Do not start pitching before you build that personal connection with your client. So this is very important point as a salesperson here. To the last point, which we already talked about, was be conscious of your personal and professional brand. It will impact your image. It will impact your client perception about you. So in this, as much as possible, and be conscious that your client will check you at some point. So these are the main points I would recommend salespeople to follow when it comes to doing business in the GCC. Now, from company's perspective and strategic perspective, I would recommend companies always here in the GCC to create and adopt an agile and flexible sales and go-to-market strategy to keep up with the GCC fast-paced market and what I call it unpredictable market. So from a strategic perspective, we always have to think about how we can be agile to tackle any predicted change in the market. So this is number one. Number two is make sure that your offering and services bundle in a very flexible way, as flexible as possible, because what actually could fit the UK market or the US market might not fit here. And here in the GCC, from my experience, people like flexibility. Don't tell me, I sell this as a bundle because, I'm interested actually in that service as a standalone service. And if I don't buy it from you, I don't want the relationship with you. So you have to think about, flexibility in your offering and in bundling your services. This is very important from on a sales department level or a strategic level in the company. The third point is always write and speak the public sector language. As I mentioned before, most of the economic and technological initiatives here in the region are public sector driven or, in semi-government sector driven. So it's very important to learn how to speak the public sector language and, align your strategy, your messaging with this actually language and with the message. So if we go back maybe 4 or 5 years ago, UAE was all about blockchain, AI. So companies who actually adopted a message that was aligned with this really actually achieved the great results. And here maybe I could mention companies like IBM. They really did a great job here in the region by aligning their messaging and strategy and even teams and senior management with the AI and the blockchain wave in the UAE. The other point is think partnership first. And I know that you love this word because your book is all about partnership. So I always recommend that think partnership before business. Build the trust, show value. Do not expect, past revenue. You need here to give. And once the trust and alignment is established, business will come easily. And this is very important. And I have seen this working very successfully at LinkedIn, where I was actually part of the public sector team. I was always telling my manager, man, why you keep giving free stuff for the government? Why you keep doing all of these activities without any, financial return? And he told me, the business will come at some point. We have actually to build that partnership scheme, and then we can talk business with government. And it really worked for LinkedIn at that time. The last 2 points mainly are about, consider selling through partners. So have a strong channel partner enablement program. Enable them, train them, because you are trying to penetrate the Saudi market or Bahraini market. From my experience, I saw this work very, very well. Having a local partner with, full enablement for them. From a leadership perspective, I always recommend, to diversify your sales team. Again, as I mentioned before, a salesperson who could succeed in the UAE, or the persona and character who could succeed in the UAE, might not work in Kuwait or in Saudi. So diversity of your team is very, very important on a leadership level. So that's it, Fred, on my side.
That's it. Wow. I mean, just wow. What an elegant way of capturing a hell of a lot of information in there. I'm looking forward to going back over this. I mean, like you saw me, I was writing all sorts of things down. I'm looking at what we're doing. I'm like taking, I'm going, oh, could do better. And I like particularly the bit where you didn't say it, but I'm going to paraphrase. Everybody should read my book.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. I'm messing about.
I want to start with myself. Would you send me a pre edition?
Oh, you're good. You're good. I will do. No, I will do definitely, because we are very, very much on the same page. What you talked about is exactly what the book's about, in that it's think partnerships, use the partnering skills, use partnering intelligence to direct the way you operate as an individual. Every single sale, doesn't matter if you're in channel or not. Yeah. All direct people think like a partner. Great. When you do that, then actually go and set up the formal partnerships with the people who are going to really catapult and spin out your business. But if you don't think like that, well, you're going to be rubbish at being a formal partner. I'd say you're not going to be a very good salesperson anyway. So yeah.
And Fred, in the last maybe 10 years for me here in UAE, I have tons of stories where we went to accounts with the partnership mindset. Maybe we closed a small deal like 30, 40K. And just maybe down the line, after 7-8 months, we would close 700K, $1 billion. But why? Because we thought, a partnership. We also maybe give to something to add is also think pilot. Pilot works very well in the region. Like I always say, start with a pilot and then, go bigger.
Yeah, it is, again, so much on the same page. So, okay, last question then, which, well, this one I always ask, but I'm not really sure it's relevant, because my last question is always, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self starting out? Now, you started at 17 anyway, so that said, you know what the question's about. It's like, looking back, what would you do different then, knowing what you know now?
This is actually a very good question, because I've been talking about this to my team recently. So 2 things here: read more and learn more. Secondly is, as a salesperson, naturally, you always focus on making your numbers, building great relationships with your clients, closing, selling, making money. However, as a salesperson, while you're doing this, you neglect building relationships with your team, your internal people in your organization. So if I would go back in time, I would actually focus on investing more time and building personal relationship with my colleagues, rather than just focusing on selling, closing. So that's something I would actually do. But I'm starting actually now doing this.
Well, no, better late than never.
Yeah.
And this is why I love asking the question, because if we from this can help, I mean, the whole podcast will hopefully help people, but if that little bit of somebody is starting out goes, hey, look, this is what these guys are saying, we've learned the hard way, we've had the pain. If they can do that, and again, the amount of information out there now that people can use to learn, it's huge. So that is really, really cool. So how do people get in touch with you? How can they contact you or connect?
LinkedIn is my first to-go place when it comes to, of course, any professional communication. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. So yeah, LinkedIn is the number one.
You don't have to say that anymore, you know. But it's true. No, it is. We'll put a link. We'll put a link to your profile in the show notes. So look, that's excellent. I'm really pleased that you're able to make the time and come and speak to us. Thank you
Fred.
so much, and
Thank you.
I look forward to our next conversation because I know we're going to have some more.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually looking forward to.
Thank you for listening to Sales Today podcast with me, Fred Copestake. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe for more and leave a review. If you didn't like it, also leave a review. It's all about feedback and learning.